Hi, hello, and how are you? Come on in and stay a while. It's time to get coached up with another edition of the Coach Scott Field Show. Invite a friend, share this with a friend. This show allows you, the viewer, to connect with some of the greatest people in the sports entertainment industry worldwide. I'm thrilled to be your host, Scott Fields. Hey, if you're listening to us in podcast form, Jimmy, my friend, and I tell you to turn that knob up. We're about to put that flavor in your ear. You're going to be entertained here for the next hour. Today, my guest is a buddy who I grew up only 6 miles from back in Indiana. He and I have both been inducted into the Indiana Sports Hall of Fame. He was a guard at IPFW. He was also an actor in the famous movie Hoosiers. He played for Terhune. He was number 5, but number 1 in your heart. He is the son of a legendary basketball player in Kokomo, Indiana, and he also had a son, Jace, who made a fantastic run with the Boilers last year. Jimmy Rayl, welcome back to the show, and it's kind of deja vu for you and I.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott, for having me. It's a little different scenery today than yesterday, but hey, I'm glad to be back.
This is kind of we're going to run it back, and we had a little technical glitch from yesterday's conversation, but wow, did I learn a lot about you and some of your past and things that you've gone through, and we're going to take the viewers through that here this afternoon. But appreciate you jumping back on with us today.
Oh, I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad we got to talk and we learned some new things about the show, and you having me on again it'll be better on this second take.
There you go. Well, let's get into it. I talked about, you know, your father just being a basketball legend and the name Rayl and what that means to the basketball community. Kind of share with the viewers who your father was, and we'll kind of, go into it that way.
Well, I'll tell you, my dad. I mean, growing up with him, he's just my dad. But I can tell you this: he's one of the best shooters I've ever been around. But for the viewers, my dad was Mr. Basketball in 1959 for the state of Indiana. They got runner-up in the state tournament. They got beat by Crispus Attucks in the championship game. He was won the Trester Award. He was a Star of Stars in the All-Star game. Then he went to IU, where back when he played at IU, you couldn't play your freshman year. You had to sit out. So he played a sophomore, junior, and senior year, scored 1,400 and some career points, averaged at 20.1 for his career. He's one of only 5 players to average 20 or more games for his career at IU, and still has the record for most points in a game, 56. He did it twice against Minnesota and Michigan State. And the first game was in overtime against Minnesota. He got 56. So he said that he wanted to get that 56 the next year against Michigan State in regulation so he could prove that the first one wasn't a fluke. But the record that he's got that no one wants to talk, that nobody talks about, he's got the record for most shots ever taken in a game at IU, 48.
Wow.
So that's pretty crazy.
Oh, and it's amazing. And you and I talked about this briefly yesterday. And, there's analytics that show that, there was no 3-point line then. And had he had a 3-point line, he'd have been scoring more than 70 points a game, with
Yeah.
his shooting proficiency and the range that, he was scoring from.
Yeah. So the one game that they did the chart on, that I don't know if it was a Minnesota or Michigan State game, but there was at least 18 3-pointers by the shooting chart. So he would have had 74 that game by today's standing.
And see, what thrills me about that, I mean, those are numbers that, Pistol Pete Maravich was putting up at LSU. And yet, your father being a high school legend there in Kokomo, I mean, even against Ron Pavey, where they scored 100 points combined, talk a little bit about that 100-point game with he and Ron.
Well, they went into it. It was the last game of the season for the North Central Conference. Newcastle, Kokomo were, you know, the top two teams in the North Central Conference, and Muncie Central also. But they went into that game battling for the NCC scoring title. Well, Ray scored 51 and my dad scored 49.
Wow.
But my dad ended up winning the scoring title for the conference that year. So, but 100 points between the two of them with no 3-point line.
I mean, that had to be a show. I mean, we're talking 1950s, 1959, and then here are these two athletes going head to head competing, and yet they're putting up, numbers like that. I can't imagine how thrilling it had to be for that gymnasium and the hundreds of people and the thousands of fans in attendance, and then people listening on the radio. I mean, what a show.
Yeah, and it was. I've been to that Church Street gym in Newcastle. It's just I don't know why I couldn't even tell you what capacity is of it, but I would say maybe 3,500 people, maybe. But it was. I'm sure it was a crazy experience for the fans that night.
Oh, I love that. And you being his son, as you mentioned, he's just dad to you. But
Yeah.
talk about how people still to this day, will come up to you and share stories or what they saw. And you know how legends grow, but being a son, hearing these stories of all these, wonderful players and people who played against him and played with him, what were some of the comments that you continue to get? Because we even talked yesterday, they've even named a street after your dad. Talk about some of the comments that you would hear and how that makes you feel being a son, knowing that your dad was just such a legend in Indiana high school basketball.
Well, I mean, the stories are, a lot of them are the same about how far out he could shoot. And, these people are watching Caitlin Clark today and saying, oh, she reminds me of your dad, how far out she shoots. And, Steph Curry, he shoots it pretty far out, but I mean, I don't know if he shoots it as far as what my dad did or not, but I mean, I never really watched him play. And I know that, a lot of the comments are about how far out he can shoot. But I mean,
I read somewhere, and just doing some research, because my dad even tells me stories of how he was at the game and talked about it, but about how he could be one step from across half court and letting it fly and just hitting them effortlessly.
yeah, I mean, his range was uncanny. I don't know. I couldn't shoot it. I could shoot it pretty far out. My son can shoot it probably farther out than I can. But I mean, even when he was older, when I was in high school, and so he was probably, in his 40s then, he was in the driveway. He'd take it out so far it was in just string music from 40 feet.
What a skill set. What a skill set.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that road being named after him and the ceremony and the Jimmy Rayl Boulevard. Take us through that moment and what that did for your heart and your soul to have, to be going downtown Kokomo and seeing a street that runs right past Memorial Gymnasium named after your father.
Well, how that came about, Tom Tolan, that works for the city of Kokomo, he had contacted me and wanted to know if we were okay with having the street named after my dad. And I said, yeah, we're totally fine with it. And anyway, Mayor Moore Tyler Moore had to okay it. He did. Had this big ceremony at Memorial Gym, and then they had guest speakers, Jerry Harkness, Tom Boyer, Matt Painter, Chris Kaufman from the IHSAA. They all came, talked, and we had a big ceremony, and they named a street. It goes all the way from Memorial Gym clear down to his childhood house at 1416 West Superior.
Wow.
So he basically grew up on Superior, which runs right next to Memorial Gym. And his mom was born and raised in a house that sits right where Memorial Gym is today. They had to demolish all those houses there to build Memorial Gym in 1949. So the house she was born and raised in was right there.
Wow.
So he may have been shooting a jump shot right from the kitchen of his mom's house.
I love that. I love that. And then, even your dad, playing at Indiana University and having the success that he had, but he's the guy who hit the very first three-pointer for the ABA Indiana Pacers.
Yes, he is. He said hit the Pacers' first three-pointer, which is, it's ironic that one of the greatest shooters in Indiana history would hit the first three-pointer for the Pacers. So
Wow.
I mean, in the three-pointer has revolutionized basketball today.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
it's, you know,
But just a great story because no one can take those things away, those accomplishments. We talk about names that are synonymous with success. And, yesterday we talked a little bit about Rick Mount and Rick Mount's grandson and the relationship that you have with the Mount family. And, here it is, Rayl and Mount and, two of the biggest names to play Indiana high school basketball. And of course, there's other names that can be mentioned in that same breath and at that same echelon. But, knowing that your father, kind of pioneered and made Indiana basketball what it is, what does that mean to you and your family?
well, just having the Mount Rail connection, it's kind of crazy the way that we're good friends with the Mounts, and we have a lot of the same, uh, you know, issues with our hometown that, like Rick and my dad are kind of, you know, they're hard nosed, stubborn people. My dad and Rick are, they're like identical. The stuff that Jordan tells me about his grandpa it just sounds like my dad.
Wow.
But yeah,
And again, you think about Indiana and Indiana rivalries, Rick Mount played for Purdue, your dad played for Indiana, and just the legend and the
yeah,
icons that they are and their abilities to shoot and their abilities to score. I've traveled the nation and I've traveled the globe, but Indiana is known for basketball, but also for their shooters. And for your dad to be in that upper echelon and that 1% that is just so supreme, it's just got
yeah,
to be so heartwarming.
yeah, it is. And like you said, you know, like David Magley always says, Jimmy Rayl and Rick Mount. Those are the two names that everybody knows in Indiana. And Big O, Oscar
That's right.
Robertson, but Rick Mount and Jimmy Rayl when it comes to shooting, and it's just crazy how good they were, and they came along at the right time to where people knew who they were, and they were just starting to shoot jump shots and shoot shots from farther out than what they did in the past. And
Wow. And again, Indiana basketball. We grew up in the generation, and your father played when there was no classification, and that made Indiana high school basketball unique. I mean, it spawned the movie Hoosiers, which is a phenomenal movie, and you get to be in that movie. But talk about Indiana basketball before classification, how you and I played in it, where, yeah, there was no three-point line. Yeah, we played in the short shorts. Yeah, communities would close down and drive for miles to support their local high school teams. Talk about that Indiana basketball and now how there's, 1A, 2A, 3A, and how classification has really tarnished what Indiana basketball was.
well, I'm still totally against class basketball,
Yeah.
and I know your high school won a state championship in class basketball, but I guess if my son went to a smaller school and they won the state, I'd be excited for him. But I would let him know that, that's not a real state championship. I mean, it is, but it isn't.
Right.
But I think today, even if they didn't have 4 classes, they had 1 class, there would be some 1A, 2A, and I know 3A schools that could win the state.
That's right.
If given the chance. But it just kind of, there's not, winning the sectional back then was almost as good as winning a state for like
That's
a
right.
1A or 2A.
That's right.
In my opinion.
And
Yeah.
Jimmy, I agree. The very first sectional championship my high school ever won was in 1978 when it was Ted Kitchell and John Kitchell. Ted went
Oh
on
yeah.
to play at Indiana. John played at Purdue, and the rally and the community involvement and the fact that our small little gymnasium, out there in Walton, Indiana, was packed to capacity. And I remember playing in that gym as a little 5th grader, at halftime, and popcorn was popping. And I mean, the energy and the enthusiasm, that was Hoosier basketball.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, and it's kind of funny. I go to some, during the basketball season, since Jason's playing now in high school, every weekend I'll pick a game to go to, and I'll go to these smaller schools, and they still get pretty good crowds,
Right.
which is amazing to me. I mean, they still get big crowds, and you go to the bigger schools like Lafayette Jeff or Richmond or Marion, and they're almost like empty.
Yeah.
The gyms are empty. So the smaller communities embrace the teams better than like
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. And matter of fact, that 78 team, we lost in the finals to the regional to Bill Green's Marion Giants. And we all know the success that they had for years. But even Kokomo High School and Memorial Gymnasium, it is one of the iconic gymnasiums when you look at, gyms, and, you talked about Newcastle and some other gyms, like 10 of the best gymnasiums in the United States are in the state of Indiana.
Exactly, they are. And Memorial Gym's another example. I coached there in 21 and 22, and we didn't have hardly any attendance. Maybe we might have had 1,000 people at a game.
Wow.
Whereas now, they had Flory. He brings in a bigger crowd. They were getting upwards of 3,000 to 4,000 per game.
Yeah.
So they start filling up. Now with the decline of Flory, with Flory gone, there probably will be a decline, and Memorial Gym will be back to where it was 5, 6 years ago. So
Right.
But
But what a staple of a gymnasium. And you as a player was able to play in that NCC, that North Central Conference, and talk about some of the schools that compete in that, because every year there are teams that are in the state finals from that strong conference.
Oh yeah, back when I played, I'm trying to think. Well, obviously, Marion won it my senior year, which was from our conference. We were in the Sweet 16 from the conference. So was Lafayette Jeff. There were years when there would be 2 or 3 teams just from the conference in the Final Four. Well, so in '85, the Richmond was in the Final Four along with Marion. And
just
so
quality basketball year after year, and the programs and the how the communities get behind it, and just Indiana basketball as a whole is just wonderful. I want to talk about your high school career before you went to IPFW. We talked yesterday, and you started off at Hayworth High School with the Huskies before it consolidated and went to Kokomo High School. Talk about your high school career, and did you have added pressure on you because of expectations, because who your father was, and you're the second coming, kind of like a Bronny James to LeBron right now, how hard was it to play in those shadows?
Well, I started out my freshman year, I started out on the JV. And then by my sophomore year, I was starting varsity. And then my junior year, still playing varsity. Well, then they decided to combine the schools in Kokomo. Hayworth and Kokomo combined into one.
Woo.
And when they did that, it was kind of like, I mean, we didn't know who was going to make the team. We didn't know who was going to be the head coach. And it ended up being Carl McNulty, which he was a great coach. But I went into my first game, the 2 weeks before the first game, I didn't know if I was starting. Well, one of the guards got hurt, couldn't play the first game. They put me in the starting position. And I was leading scorer on the team that year. We went to the semi-state, got beat by East Chicago by 2 points, Kenny Lofton and Freeman West, who were big time college players. And then, we had a really good season. I think we finished 18-8 for the year. We got second place in the conference behind Marion, which nobody was beating Marion. I think they went undefeated that year. So.
Yeah, and again, let's repeat for the viewers. Again, we got, Jimmy Rayl Jr. here with us, and this was before classification. So an 18-8 record against the level of competition you were playing against, that's very competitive.
That's a solid season. Yeah, we finished 12-8 regular season, and then we won 6 games during the tournament. So actually, we finished 13-7, won 5 games in the tournament, and lost one of the games in the tournament in the semi-state.
Wow. And you mentioned the name Coach Carl McNulty. How did he help you with your development, and what type of life lessons did you learn from him? Because that's a name that, resonates as a big name coach, in the state.
Yeah, Carl. So Carl he was one of the greatest coaches in the state, and he'd never won a regional until my senior year in all of his coaching. So we always played, Kokomo always played in the Anderson regional, which was at the Wigwam.
Another great basketball high school coliseum, stadium, arena.
Crazy place. I used to go to this regionals when Kokomo would go there when I was a kid, and I was like, they would never win. They got beat by Carmel one year. They would always lose the regional. Well, my senior year, I made a shot falling down to beat Noblesville, who was ranked number 3 in the state, and we won our first regional. It was the first regional at Kokomo since 1967, but it was Carl McNulty's first regional ever.
And that's phenomenal. And you hit the game-winning shot. I mean, think about those are memories that no one can ever take away from Jimmy Rayl Jr. And then talk about your recruitment, going into IPFW, because again, that's a program, that was on the rise, and they were building it up. And who were the coaches that you met with, and what was that recruitment process like for you?
Well, the first school that I didn't really have a whole lot of offers. A lot of the lower, like Division III NAIA, I just didn't really have any interest in going to school there. And I went down to Murray State and worked their camp and talked to Coach Steve Newton down there. And I thought we had a deal for down there, but I kind of didn't really want to go that far away. That's like a 7-hour drive.
Yeah. So
I had a friend of mine that played at Kokomo 2 years before me. And he was the starting center for IPFW. He talked me into coming up to IPFW and talking to Coach Tim Russell, who was from Tipton. And, Coach Russell was awesome. He got me up there, talked to me, and offered me a spot. He didn't promise me any playing time or anything like that, but came up there and had a great time, made some 3-pointers, had some good teammates that are still friends today. And so, yeah.
Wow, great situation.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think just from recall, is it the Mastodons or the Dons
Mastodon.
of
Yeah. The Don. Yeah.
IPFW?
Yeah. Yep. The Mastodon. Yeah.
Gotta
So yeah,
love.
when we were there, the volleyball program was bigger than the basketball program. They're really big into men's and women's volleyball.
Wow, wow,
So yeah,
that's so cool. And
yeah.
then again, going into your sophomore year, there's a movie that comes out that's about to be world renowned with Gene Hackman, the movie Hoosiers. Now, growing up in Indiana, we all watch that movie, and it reverberates in our heart because that's the way we grew up with our basketball. It's the story of the Milan team, and they're going against the Muncie Central Bobcats. You get casted for a role in that movie. You get to represent Terhune, and you're wearing number 5. How did that process, work for you? What was it like going through the casting and getting the call that, hey, yeah, you're going to be able to be in the movie Hoosiers?
Well, first I went down to a casting call down in Indianapolis. It was down at the Natatorium in downtown Indy. There must have been 500 guys.
Wow.
And I walked in with the guy that played Jimmy Chitwood.
Oh,
He
yeah.
carried his own basketball. Me and my buddies were making fun of him. Well, little did we know he's going to end up being the main guy in the movie. But they did the casting call there. We did some basketball. And the good thing for me was 2 of the guys, David Anspaugh and Angelo Pizzo, they were fraternity brothers of my dad.
Oh, wow.
They were Sigma News after my dad was at IU. So they were a little younger than my dad, but they were Sigma News at IU. So I kind of had a little inside connection to get in the role. Well, it came down to where when I'd read lines for the movie, I mean, I didn't have any acting skill. I never had been trained in acting. So they kind of told me that we got a spot for you in the movie. We don't know what it is. It's not going to be one of the main spots, but we do have a spot. Well, I talked to my dad, and he said, we'll play it by ear, see what happens. We didn't know if I was going to be able to do it or not because of school, but it worked out. I would drive down to Brownsburg, and we had 2 days that we practiced for the movie and 3 days that we filmed. So it was 5 days that I spent for the whole movie. And the filming days were actually all day long. They started at 8 in the morning and ended at 8 at night. But they would have a lot of breaks in between the filming, and all the guys would get around and shoot free throws. And Buddy, or Brad Long, who played Buddy, had the record of 46 free throws in a row until I came up. and this is in shooting in front of all the people in the crowd.
Yeah.
I hit 75 in a row, and they made me stop.
The
The producer said, we got to stop. We got to get back to filming. So I hit 75. We went back to filming, and about an hour later, they had me go back up to continue my streak. I missed my first one. So, which the first one's always the hardest.
There you go.
But I did have the record 75 in a row for the whole crew.
That's phenomenal shooting. That's that Rayl touch. I got to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm friends with a guy who's a consultant who works with movies and commercials. And just my opinion after conversations with him, I think it's better to have a basketball player and train them to be an actor than have an actor to try to train them to be a basketball player, because it doesn't look natural if there's not basketball players out there on the court playing and competing. How competitive were those production scenes when you're playing against Hickory and you're Terhune? And I love the fact that you're number 5 and you get a shot off in the corner and knock it down. How competitive were those sessions where the players are really getting after it and competing?
Well, most of the guys in the movie were former high school players, some college players. There was a guy on my team that was actually a professional actor, and his actual scene got cut out of the movie.
Oh,
But he was supposedly was on Hickory, and he came to Terhune, and that's why there was a big fight scene in that,
yeah.
because there was rivalry because he came from Hickory and now he's at Terhune, and they had the big fight scene. And he's the one that started the fight, but he was a professional actor. He wasn't a basketball player. He couldn't even shoot. So, and then David Niedorf was on the Hickory team, and he's the one that his dad was Dennis Hopper, the drunk. He was a professional actor, and I ever since Hoosiers, I saw him in. He was in Bull Durham, and he was in Platoon, and so I saw him in several movies after Hoosiers. So
That's so cool. That's cool. And again, that fight scene comes up where, he gets shoved into the trophy case, the glass breaks, and then people run down the corner, and you're running down the corner looking, trying to separate everybody. Hey, acting genius on your part right there. Good job not to get cut up there.
Well, they cut out. We had to film that 3 times. They would bring in a new trophy case, and we did it 3 times.
Wow.
But there's a couple where I was in there throwing some jabs. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it had to feel pretty good that they were able to take some shots of you where you're hitting shots and making shots. You got to sit back now and pat yourself on the back like, yeah, that's the way I used to do it.
I hit a couple shots, and the best part, I'm the one that got fouled when Dennis Hopper comes on the court drunk. I'm sitting there, I'm cracking my knuckles.
Oh, good stuff. Well, it's just such a phenomenal movie. And, I think a lot of people who love basketball love that movie. And I've got DVDs of it. Seems like when it comes on, I'm always going to play it. And I always pick up something different from the movie every time that I see it. But it's such a meaningful, purposeful movie for us who grew up in Indiana, because that's what Indiana basketball was all about. I mean, Hilliard Gates and Hinkle Fieldhouse and, Milan versus, Muncie Central Bobcats. And I mean, your dad had some great games against those, Muncie Central teams.
Oh yeah, he had some really good games. I mean, Muncie Central is always a big rivalry of Kokomo. So
I love that. We talked yesterday, and you talked about the headline where I think what he have 45, and he grabbed grabbed a tiger by the tail, or a bobcat by the tail, or
but so the Muncie Central's mascot was a bearcat.
Bearcat.
So a writer for the Star wrote a thing after that game because my Kokomo beat Muncie Central in that game, and my dad scored 45, and so it's something like Jimmy Rayl caught a bearcat by the tail, wouldn't let him out alive, shot him dead with 45.
Oh, what a great headline. I mean, you think, you see on social media today, caption this. What a great caption.
Yeah, see, that's the thing too with today's high school basketball. You don't get that stuff in the Star anymore because there's so much social media. Most people are looking at social media to see it.
So true. Yeah. And I'm glad you're mentioning that stuff. What were some of the things that stood out most to you and meant something to you from that Hoosiers movie?
Probably the coolest stuff was just talking to Dennis Hopper about, because he'd been in 2 movies with James Dean. So I kind of got to talk to
another Indiana legend, Fairmont.
Another Indiana legend. And so on that scene where Dennis Hopper was drunk coming onto the court, he would spin in the hallway and come walking out all kind of like loopy. And he told me, he says, back in the day, he said, I really would have been drunk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he said back in the day, I've been drunk. That's why I'm spinning right now to do this.
Oh, man. Did you get to have any conversations with like Gene Hackman or?
Well, Gene Hackman was, he was totally standoffish to us basketball players. I think Gene Hackman was just there to collect a paycheck.
Wow, that's interesting.
I don't think he realized how big of a movie it was going to become.
Yeah.
So he was kind of, he was just not a nice guy to
Yeah,
the
gotcha.
players.
How
Now,
about
Barbara Hershey?
did you guys get to have reunions and see each other or get together or stay in contact with other basketball players from that movie?
Yeah, I mean, they'll call us back. They had one a few years ago back down at the Conseco Fieldhouse, or Bankers Life, they call it now. And you get down there and meet some of the guys, sign autographs. I just recently, it was at the Anderson for the Hall of Fame basketball tournament, and ran into Brad Long. We went over to the Hickory gym, and he showed me around. And yeah, so yeah, I stay in touch. Brad Long and Steve Holler are about the only two that I
Great stuff right there. Oh, that's such great stuff. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Jimmy Rayl Jr. You're watching the Coach Scott Field Show. I'm actually thrilled we're rerunning this again because there's other questions that come to my mind after a great conversation with you yesterday, my friend, and really enjoying chopping this up with you. Talk about now, because NIL, NCAA rules. You were actually suspended for a few games because you had a movie role and you were paid to be in Hoosiers. Talk about the difference, what would happen today and what repercussions you had because you were in the movie and got paid for a role.
Well, so I didn't know I was going to get in trouble until after the movie came out. And then the NCAA said, hey, there was 3 guys that played NCAA college basketball that got paid to be in this movie. Some got paid more than others. Steve Holler got paid. Steve Holler is probably still getting paid today, but some got paid more, some got paid a little less.
Yeah.
But we all got paid to be in the movie, and they said we didn't get it for our acting; it was for our basketball. Which, I mean, yeah, I obviously wasn't doing it for acting, but so they made us pay all the money back. And they suspended me for 3 games. I was the first player in IPFW history to get suspended by the NCAA.
And think about it. It was nothing. There was no harmful intent on your part. You've been asked to play in a movie. You get the role. You have to be excited. The movie comes out, and then all of a sudden, the NCAA contacts your coaching staff and says, "Hey, you've got an ineligible player because he accepted money." That had to be what a shock and surprise on your part, I'm sure, because you didn't do it with intent to do something wrong.
And here's the thing. What we did, we had to write a check from my account and send it to the NCAA, or send it to the movie company. We sent it to the movie company.
Wow.
Orion Pictures. And basically they didn't cash the check, so I still got paid.
Yeah.
But we had to make it look like we gave the money back.
Yeah.
The 3 games.
And then be suspended 3 games.
Yeah, it's 3 games. Which was the 3 games were, it's 3 games out of almost 30. So
right.
It wasn't right.
Man, and that's too bad, because today, now with NIL, name, image, and likeness, that would never happen. And you have residuals and things like that, where I'm glad the NCAA has made the change and be more proactive, but it takes away amateurism and is changing the landscape, just like high school basketball landscape's going to change too, with colleges, transfer portals, and classification basketball with high school. There's been so many changes with athletics. It makes it kind of hard to know and keep up with all the rules of what's going on.
Oh yeah, I'm not a big fan of the NIL until my son becomes a player at Purdue.
Yeah.
Then I like the NIL.
Yeah, right,
because,
right.
He's getting a paycheck each month.
Right. Let's talk about that, Jimmy, because think of the legacy. Your father is a phenomenal player with a name and a street named after him. You have a great career. Now your son gets recruited by Matt Painter at Purdue University. They make it to the NCAA finals last year. How much pride and joy does that give you to see your son with Purdue Boilermakers and Matt Painter making the deepest run Purdue has ever made in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, he wasn't actually, he really wasn't recruited by Purdue. I mean, he got, Matt and I talked, and he was offered a walk-on spot.
Yeah.
So, which, I mean, so people don't get confused.
Sure.
He wasn't out there scoring 35, 40 points a game.
Right. Yeah.
But he is a perfect person for Purdue's program. He's a Purdue person. He's got a basketball. He's like you. He's a basketball. He loves basketball.
Yep.
And I mean, the kid has basketball skills. He can shoot.
As I'm saying, a great role player who can shoot it. It's going to space out the floor, give Edney room to kind of operate down in the paint. He gets to compete against, some of the best players every day and hone those skills.
Yeah, and he was a 4.0 student in high school. So he fits the role of what Purdue wants as their like practice players or third string or whatever you want to call his role. But he has a role on the team, which that role wouldn't have been available if Painter hadn't offered it to him.
That's right. That's right. Well,
yeah. So it's probably the greatest position you could have in college basketball, because like I told you yesterday, my roommate at IPFW, we went to the Big Ten tournament. I took him to the Big Ten tournament with me, and he goes, I would trade my whole college career to have what your son's got for 1 year.
I'm sorry, that gives me goosebumps. It really does, because, being a basketball junkie and a basketball lifer and someone who loves the history of the game, to know that proverbial torch has been passed from your father to you, to him, which was his grandfather. The name continues to impact, Indiana basketball. I just think it's a tremendous honor and legacy.
Yeah, it's what Matt did by passing the torch to Jace to go to play at Purdue and be on a national runner-up team is it's just unbelievable.
Oh,
so
yeah. And I thank you so much for sharing those stories and sharing those insights. And let's talk about you. You are a cancer survivor. We had a conversation yesterday, and it just really stood out to me because, it was during the pandemic. And share with the viewers with me what you shared yesterday, about, the fatigue, the shortness of breath, walking to the mailbox, there was no air there. And then talk about that diagnosis and where that's at now.
Well, so what happened is I was, like I said, I couldn't mow the yard without getting winded. And here I'm a runner. I've ran in like 6 half marathons. I'm in top shape up until I get this disease. But I just couldn't breathe. And so I went to my doctor. I thought I had COVID because there was a lot of symptoms of COVID. And they said, no, you don't have COVID. Maybe we ought to do a CAT scan and a PET scan and just find out what's going on here. So it was right before Labor Day of 2022. And I went up by Maryville to get this PET scan, which that kind of made me sick when I got that done. It was but got that done, and it comes back and it's cancer. And, we just, then we had to just figure out what kind of treatment we were going to do with this cancer. And so my doctor in Kokomo, they did all these tests to figure out that the cancer I have is a very rare form of, it's not from smoking, it's non-small cell cancer, but it's an ALK is the type of cancer it is. And it's very rare. And It's not curable. It's terminal. I'll always have this cancer, but there's medication to take care of it, which I take 3
Yeah,
pills a
and
day.
you talked yesterday about the role your wife helped play through this and how she was so supportive and, went to your treatments and, was able to, kind of be there for you and be a rock for you. Talk a little bit about that, because we're not just talking about winning a game now. Now we're talking about winning in life. So you can continue to be there for Jace and live a quality of life. Talk to us again about, the stress and the anxiety of being diagnosed with the C word and how instrumental your wife was in that.
Well, so yeah, when I found out, I was went to Jace and my daughter Reese and my wife and told them. We were all pretty upset, but my wife is probably the strongest. I mean, she's a Christian, she's a believer in everything that God has for our well-being. So she's been by my side from the start of it to the end. She found this specialist in Detroit that I go to, Dr. Gadgiel. He's a specialist with his cancer. She's taken me up to appointments up there, and she's just been, yeah, like you said, my rock. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't even. It's just she makes it a lot easier for me.
Right. I love hearing that, and it gives me chills knowing that, that spiritual factor and faith, kind of help lead and guide you through that. We talked, and we'd be remiss if we didn't, mention this real quickly. You were also instrumental in bringing the Bobcats to Kokomo with the TBL, and we mentioned Dave Magley again, the 1978 Mr. Basketball, who has a TBL team right there in Kokomo, the Bobcats, with a couple of your owners, Beeler and Jansen. Talk about that and what that's also helped with the Kokomo community and playing right there at Memorial Coliseum.
Well, the thing is, with Magley came to me. Well, actually, Jordan Mountain hooked me and Magley up and said that he's got this basketball league and he thinks Kokomo would be a great spot to have a team. So I thought, well, I said, what do we do to get this thing going? Because I think it will work. And he goes, well, we need owners, someone that has money. And I said, I got 2 guys that I think would fit the bill for this. And anyway, Mark Jansen and Jeff Beeler brought them on board. We talked with Magley, and next thing you know, we've got the Bobcats in Kokomo, and we get Cliff Levingston as head coach. And I know Mark and I had talked about having you come up as the coach, which would have been awesome too.
But the fact that you were able to get, Coach Livingston there, who won championships with Michael Jordan in those Bulls, what a great thing for the community, because it's always been important to me that, Kokomo and my home area where I've born and raised, that there's success there, and they have one of the more successful franchises throughout the entire league as far as attendance and community support and partnerships from sponsors. I think it's wonderful that you had an instrumental role in that as well, and got to congratulate you for that, because again, there's multiple levels of basketball. High school basketball is phenomenal. You got the minor league level there now, and then of course you got your Pacers who have done well. And it's just wonderful to see that, again, you had an instrumental role in bringing that franchise, to fruition.
Yeah, I'm like I call myself the founder. I'm the founder of the Bobcats.
So, yeah, I love it. Well, another thing we got to bring up, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes. You had a video that went viral in your UPS career. I actually looked at it, and man, that little dance and little wiggle you had as you were putting them boxes down, Jimmy, you got some moves, man. You were swaggy before the term was even put out there.
Well, my wife says I'm the worst dancer ever, and I go viral with the dancing video. So
I love it. Tell the story a little bit. I mean, again, you had the running shoes on. You're delivering a package. There's a big box, and you put two boxes down. You see that little camera there, and next thing you know, you're getting kind of
yes,
jiggy there.
yeah. So I I always delivered there, and I knew they had that little camera there, and it was right before Christmas, right before I retired. So I mean, I was wearing the running shoes because it's Christmas time, so I've got to go quick. And anyway, I just thought, I'll do this dance for the girl that lived there. I mean, my wife and her are friends. So she just decided to put that out there on social media. Well, it went out, and by the time I got off work that night, I got a text from Jace. He goes, "This is so embarrassing." He goes, "You just went viral with this video that you sent out." But they were all embarrassed about it because all their friends saw it, and so. But I mean, it went viral within less than 24 hours. So
Jimmy, I love it because I mean it couldn't happen to a better person with a better personality. Not only are you the founder of the Bobcats, you could probably be a founder of TikTok because now people are going viral on TikTok with doing dances just like you did years ago before it was ever the thing to do.
oh yeah, I mean, people try to replicate that dance all the time.
I would ask you to do it for us right now, but I know I know you had a little scan yesterday and don't have that energy, but man, I really enjoyed watching that, and I just started laughing immediately, especially after I've got to know you better.
Yeah, you can just Google Jimbo UPS and it pops right up.
Oh my goodness! Hey, we've got just like a minute or two left. The relationships that we build in basketball are what basketball is all about, and I've been blessed to have coached around the globe and around the nation. But share with the viewers of the Coach Scott Field Show just some meaningful words that has kind of helped you with your legacy and what the impact you've made in your communities and with basketball.
Well, I mean, basically, you just have to believe in yourself, be positive. Like my wife says, sometimes I'm a little too negative, but you've always got to be positive. You start the day with a positive, you're going to have a good day. And like I told you yesterday, with Jim Valvano, when he had the cancer, I think of this every day. There's three things you should do. You should think, you should laugh, and you should cry. If you do that in a day, you've had a full day. So if you can try to do that, and if you get to do that every day, you've lived a full day. So
Uh,
that's one thing I would give to that's one of the greatest things that, you know.
I, I love that, Jimmy, and thank you for sharing those purposeful words. You are a servant leader. You have so much humility and such a servant heart. Love how you continue to, impact others and serve others, and really appreciate you taking the time on 2 days in a row to being a
Yeah.
guest here on the Coach Scott Field Show. God bless you, and thanks for all that you continue to do for the communities. And it means the world that we've been able to sit here and have this conversation. So I thank you.
Oh, I thank you for having me on the show. I love doing it.
Well, listen, God bless you on your journey. Let's stay in touch. And when I get back home to visit family, we've got to get together and let's continue telling fun stories because I know we could go on doing this for hours. And to think that, we've been so involved in basketball and we grew up 6 miles from each other and we've never been able to hug each other's neck and sit and break bread.
Yeah. Next time you're in town, we're definitely going to do that.
We've got to, my man. Ladies and gentlemen,
Yep.
again, this is Jimmy Rayl Jr. sharing phenomenal stories and just a quality character. And it's guys like this that drive this show. And I'm just honored to have had the time to share with him. And thank you so much for viewing. Again, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Catch us on DBTV exclusively. And Jimmy Rayl, God bless you and thank you. And continued positive vibes, as you're keeping this cancer in remission right now. God bless you.
Thank you, Scott.